Something interesting just happened with the Philadelphia Eagles during this busy stretch of NFL free agency, and if you've been paying attention to how this roster is being built, you're starting to see a very clear strategy from Howie Roseman. The Eagles quietly made two new signings that might not look like blockbuster headlines at first glance, but when you really break them down, they tell you a lot about what the organization is trying to do with this roster heading into the next season. The first move involves the secondary, and the Eagles brought in veteran cornerback Jonathan Jones. This is a really intriguing addition when you consider the current structure of the Eagles' cornerback room. Right now, the team already has two elite players in the secondary. Quinyon Mitchell is expected to continue playing on the outside, while Cooper DeJean has established himself as one of the best slot defenders in football and will remain inside where he has been extremely effective. Not long ago, the Eagles also added another outside corner, signing Rick Woolen to a one-year deal worth up to $15 million. That already gave Philadelphia two primary outside corners in Mitchell and Woolen, with DeJean locking down the slot position. So when the Eagles added Jonathan Jones, it immediately raised an interesting question. Where exactly does he fit into this defense? Jones brings a lot of experience to the table. He originally entered the league as an undrafted free agent back in 2016 and managed to carve out a very long and respectable career in the NFL. That alone says a lot about the type of player he is. Undrafted players rarely last this long unless they are extremely reliable and smart on the field. Jones spent most of his career with the New England Patriots, where he became a trusted piece of their defense and even won 2 Super Bowls during his time there. Now at 32 years old and turning 33 in September, Jones is no longer the young prospect he once was, but he still brings valuable traits that coaches love. He's known for being a tough defender, a willing tackler, and a very intelligent player who understands defensive concepts. Even though he's slightly undersized for a perimeter corner at around 5'9" or 5'10", he has managed to hold his own on the outside throughout his career. Last season with Washington, he played more than 400 snaps on the outside, showing he can still handle that role if needed. Over the course of his career, he has played in 144 games and started 78 of them, which is a significant amount of experience for a defensive back. That kind of veteran presence can be extremely valuable in a locker room, especially for a team that already has young talent in the secondary. If you look at some of his production, there have been seasons where he was very active around the football. In 2022, he recorded 4 interceptions and also forced 3 fumbles, showing that he has the ability to create turnovers. Over the last few seasons, he has consistently produced pass breakups as well, with numbers like 7, 6, and 5 across recent years. Those types of plays are something the Eagles value highly in their defensive system. But here's where things get interesting for Eagles fans. This signing doesn't necessarily guarantee that Jonathan Jones will make the final 53-man roster. The Eagles already have several players competing for depth in the secondary, and the team has been actively evaluating multiple options. Players like Kelly Ringo are still in the mix, although there are questions about whether he can fully develop as a cornerback at the NFL level. He does, however, bring significant value on special teams because of his straight line speed. Philadelphia also drafted Mac McWilliams out of UCF last year, and he's another player who could be competing for a role in the defensive back rotation. Jacorian Bennett is still on the roster as well, and there is even the possibility of positional adjustments within the secondary, including Michael Carter potentially making a full-time move to safety. Another factor that might explain the Jonathan Jones signing is coaching familiarity. The Eagles recently hired Mike Pellegrino to coach their defensive backs, and Pellegrino previously worked with Jones during their time together in New England. These types of coaching connections have clearly been a theme for Philadelphia during this free agency period, with several players joining the roster who already have relationships with members of the coaching staff. So when you put all of this together, the Jonathan Jones move looks less like a headline signing and more like a calculated depth addition. It adds veteran leadership, competition in the secondary, and a player who already understands the expectations of an experienced defensive backs coach. And when you look at how Howie Roseman builds rosters, these kinds of smart depth moves often end up becoming more important than people initially realize. But that wasn't the only move the Eagles made, and the second signing might actually have an even bigger impact on the defensive front. Philadelphia also added a pass rusher who could become an important rotational piece in Vic Fangio's defense. And once you look at his production and the type of role he might play in this system, the strategy behind the signing becomes very interesting. So the big question for Eagles fans right now is this: what do you think about the Jonathan Jones addition to the secondary, and do you believe this veteran cornerback can actually earn a real role role in this defense. Now, the second move the Eagles made might not have dominated headlines either, but it could quietly become one of the more interesting additions to this defense, depending on how things develop during the season. Philadelphia signed edge rusher Arnold Ebiketie to a one-year contract worth up to $7.5 million, with $4 million guaranteed. That type of deal tells you a lot about the expectations. It's a low-risk move with the potential for a really solid reward if he plays up to his abilities. Ebiketie enters this situation at 27 years old and still has plenty of athleticism to contribute as a rotational pass rusher. His background is also interesting because he played college football first at Temple before transferring to Penn State, where he developed into one of the more intriguing defensive prospects in the country. Eventually, he was selected in the second round of the 2022 NFL Draft with the 38th overall pick, which shows the kind of potential scouts once saw in him. Throughout his NFL career so far, Ebiketie has shown flashes of being an effective pass rusher, although he hasn't consistently been a full-time starter. In 4 seasons, he has played in 67 games, but started only 12 of them. That tells you he's mostly been used as part of a rotation rather than a primary defensive end. Still, the production has been respectable for someone in that type of role. Across his career, he has recorded 16 sacks while contributing pressures and quarterback hits when given the opportunity. If you look at his season-by-season numbers, you can see the flashes of what he can do. As a rookie, he played in 16 games and recorded 2.5 sacks. The following season, he played in all 17 games and produced 6 sacks. In 2024, he again appeared in all 17 games and finished with another 6 sacks. Most recently, he played another full season but saw fewer opportunities, finishing with 2 sacks while starting just 3 games. The key thing here is that Ebiketie has always been more of a situational pass rusher rather than a dominant every down defender, but that's actually where this move makes sense for the Eagles. Philadelphia doesn't need him to come in and be the main star on the edge. The starting roles are already expected to belong to Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. That means Ebiketie can focus on doing what he does best, which is attacking the quarterback in passing situations. Physically, Ebiketie is considered a bit of a tweener for the position. He isn't the biggest edge rusher in the league, but he makes up for that with quickness and burst off the line of scrimmage. In a defensive system like the one Vic Fangio runs, that type of athleticism can be extremely useful, especially when used in creative pass rushing packages. What makes this signing even more interesting is the potential value. If Ebiketie performs well and reaches the incentives in his contract, the Eagles could end up paying the full $7.5 million. But if that happens, it likely means he produced somewhere around 8 to 10 sacks during the season, which would make the contract look like an absolute bargain for Philadelphia. There are also some encouraging analytical indicators. Despite playing only 384 snaps last season, he still generated 25 total pressures, along with 19 quarterback hurries, 4 quarterback hits, and 17 defensive stops. His overall defensive grade was also solid, showing that when he's on the field, he can still create disruption for opposing offenses. Another thing to remember is that the Eagles have a long history of maximizing rotational pass rushers. The team has consistently built defensive lines with depth so that players can stay fresh and attack the quarterback in waves. Ebiketie fits perfectly into that philosophy because he doesn't need to play 70 snaps a game to be effective. If he's used in the right situations, his speed and explosiveness could make him a valuable piece of the rotation. When you step back and look at both of these moves together, the strategy becomes pretty clear. The Eagles aren't just chasing big names during free agency. They're focusing on depth, versatility, and players who can fit specific roles within the system. Jonathan Jones adds veteran experience and competition to the secondary, while Arnold Ebiketie strengthens the pass rush rotation with a player who still has upside. These types of signings might not immediately dominate national headlines, but they're often the moves that end up making a difference when injuries happen, or when the team needs fresh legs late in the season. That's how strong rosters are built, and it's a big reason why Philadelphia continues to stay competitive year after year. Now, I want to hear from you, because Eagles fans always have strong opinions about these offseason moves. Do you think Arnold Ebiketie could turn into a sneaky impact pass rusher in this defense? And are these the kind of smart depth signings that can help push the Eagles deeper into the season? Another layer to these moves that Eagles fans should pay attention to is the pattern that continues to appear throughout this free agency period. When you examine the players Philadelphia has added, a clear theme starts to emerge: familiarity with coaches and system fit. This is not random. It's a very intentional strategy by the front office and the coaching staff. Take Jonathan Jones, for example. One of the biggest connections behind that signing is the presence of Mike Pellegrino on the Eagles coaching staff. Pellegrino was recently hired as the defensive backs coach in Philadelphia, and he previously worked with Jones during their time together in New England. That kind of relationship matters a lot in the NFL. Coaches want players they trust, players who already understand their teaching style, and players who can help establish the standard inside the locker room and meeting rooms. When a veteran like Jones enters a defensive back room that already includes talented young players, he can become a mentor figure almost immediately. Remember, this is a player who has been in the league since 2016 and survived as an undrafted free agent. That alone tells you something about his discipline, his preparation, and his ability to adapt year after year. Even if he ends up playing a limited role on the field, his presence during practice and film sessions can still be valuable. Younger corners like Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and others can learn from someone who has played in big games, won championships, and handled a variety of offensive schemes over a decade-long career. And if injuries occur, one which they almost always do during an NFL season, having a veteran who understands defensive concepts and can step into multiple roles becomes extremely important. That flexibility is likely one of the main reasons the Eagles decided to bring him in. Now, shifting back to Arnold Ebiketie, there's also a reason why the Eagles targeted a player like him specifically for the edge rotation. His skill set fits very naturally into the type of pass rushing packages the team likes to run. He has shown flashes of burst, speed, and the ability to pressure quarterbacks even when he's not playing a massive number of snaps. Last season alone, he produced 25 pressures despite playing fewer than 400 defensive snaps. That kind of efficiency is something defensive coordinators pay attention to. If a player can create disruption without needing heavy playing time, it makes him a very useful piece in a rotation-heavy defensive line. And remember, the Eagles don't necessarily need Ebiketie to become a star. What they need is someone who can step into passing downs, bring energy off the edge, and occasionally get to the quarterback. If he can do that consistently, then this signing could easily become one of the better value deals of this free agency period. Another reason this move makes sense is that Philadelphia has always believed in building defensive line depth. Over the years, the Eagles have consistently rotated multiple pass rushers to keep everyone fresh. When your defensive line can attack in waves, it becomes much harder for opposing offensive lines to keep up late in games. Ebiketie fits perfectly into that philosophy. He's still young enough to improve, he has already shown flashes of production, and on a one-year contract, he essentially has the opportunity to prove himself again. And that might be the most important part of this entire situation. For players like Ebiketie, a one-year deal often becomes a proving ground. If he performs well in Philadelphia, he could significantly increase his value across the league next offseason. That motivation alone can sometimes bring out the best in a player. So when you combine everything,